Welcome to the Glass House. We continue the journey down the emotional roller coaster. Lynley, how are you feeling? Are you emotional today?
I'm feeling a little guilty today.
You should be feeling guilty because that's the topic.
Yeah. What should I be feeling guilty about, though?
I don't know, but I think Paige is about to make you feel guilty. Paige Greene, one of our favorite people at Lifeway, also has gone to school to become a licensed counselor, which is a really cool thing you've done. So Paige, introduce yourself, tell us a little about you, and then we're going to right into this topic about guilt.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here to talk about guilt. Gosh, who doesn't want to talk about guilt? Okay, so I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee. Praise God, I just finished that up late in October. And I am a therapist on the side. Thank you, Ben and Lifeway, for letting me have a little bit of flexibility at Lifeway to be able to counsel a few clients a week. And otherwise at Lifeway, I lead our author relations. So I get to use a little bit of counseling there. I love to love on our authors and get them a Starbucks at an event, just whatever they need to make them feel a part of our culture and life here at Lifeway as part of a sisterhood of Lifeway women. And then I also get to lead our destination events because someone must lead the cruises and things like that. So
Yeah.
I
Taking one for the team.
I am, and I have to go out there with the some of our wonderful authors and artists to have retreats on the sea and tours to Israel and things like that. So we love that. So I get to lead that area. I'm just incredibly thankful.
Well, let's hop right into the topic today because it's such a heavy one and an important one. Paige, one of our favorite parts about doing podcasts is introducing our audience to people we love. And we know you've spent a lot of time thinking about how to help people through their mess, and guilt is a big part of it. I want to read what Chip Dodd says in his opening paragraph about guilt. This is what he says. Guilt is good. Guilt brings freedom. It is the emotional and spiritual gift that allows us to feel and accept that we've done something wrong. It sparks the wish for change. It prompts us to seek forgiveness, and forgiveness that sets us free. Guilt is all about forgiveness if we want freedom. And I was thinking about that in terms of we as Christians, at the very heart of what we believe is that we need forgiveness, and we can't get there without understanding that we've done wrong through guilt. So this is a really important thing for us to feel. How do you feel about talking about guilt? Like, is it an overwhelming topic for you?
You know, when Angie called me and said, "Hey, how about talking about guilt?" At first I was daunted by that. I was like, wow, guilt and not hurt or another emotion, regular emotion. But when I thought more about it and thinking about my perspective as a counselor, it's what I deal with a lot in the counseling office. Like it is so, because guilt is so heavy. And if someone has unresolved guilt, then they're just stuck. And so it can be super painful, and long-held guilt can be super destructive. So as I researched some and kind of got my head into it, then yes, I was actually excited to talk about this today.
I love the way you said that. Counseling often is a person trying to get free from a weight that's on them. And sometimes they're guilty of something they've done wrong, but sometimes they're not. They just feel guilty. So I feel like that's a really great place to start this conversation is how do you help people separate the two?
Well, because there is this kind of research, CSI kind of thing you have to do with guilt of where is it coming from. And in my research, I came across a great podcast that talked about appropriate and inappropriate guilt. And I think what Chip's talking about and what we deal with day to day in our sin and Christ's forgiveness and all of that and repentance is what appropriate guilt. I've done something wrong. I am guilty. And so I'm going to ask forgiveness to either God or another person. And so that's can be quickly resolved. But inappropriate guilt would be something that comes either from you that's not true, or from someone else kind of trying to guilt trip you or put you, make you feel guilty. Or as, when you had Nicole on a while back and talking about, blame, who's someone trying to blame you and put their guilt on you. And so it's research, like where the first thing we look for, I try to land in the truth space with clients a lot. Like, what is really true? What are you feeling? Where is this coming from? Like, and people that are chronically guilty from inappropriate guilt is really hard to come against.
So appropriate guilt, you talked about how that is where you feel like you should apologize to somebody. I mean, is that kind of similar to conviction? I mean, when we feel convicted about something, we're just feeling appropriate guilt and thinking we need to reconcile the situation.
Yeah, right. So there's sources of appropriate guilt would be Holy Spirit, and ourselves, just our and personal. Oh, I know I did something wrong, and then or the spirit's like, hey, you shouldn't have said that. That was so hurtful, and that check in your spirit, and you go back and you're like, hey, I'm so sorry I said that. That would be, I think, appropriate guilt, and so.
So inappropriate guilt, back to your question, would be, as a pastor's wife, that's so much of our audience, they're unable, maybe there's absolutely no reason they can't attend an event, but maybe they're just worn out. They're exhausted. It's not necessarily that they're out of town. It's not that their kid's sick. It's just that they need to say no. For their mental capacity. But, it's a choir event, and maybe a couple of choir members are like, oh, we sure did miss you there. Were you sick? Were your kids sick? Kind of thing. And so we feel guilty because we were not there. But I feel like you're saying that's the inappropriate guilt, because really we don't have to answer to other people.
Yeah. Right. So are we going to receive that and take on that guilt, or are we going to send it back and say, no? My personal little philosophy or thing I say is the guilt trip or the guilt train heads out of town. It just, it's not good for relationships. It doesn't draw people closer. It doesn't make you want to go to that event again next time. Like it's a distancing of relationship when someone tries to make you feel guilty. And if you don't accept it, just say, no, kids were sick, and just, I hope it went great. Just send it right back. Send the train right back to them. Not guilt train, but yeah.
So is it okay to say, no, everything was fine, I just needed to skip that night?
Yeah. The other thing to respond is, you don't owe anyone an answer. Like, you don't owe anyone what you were doing, an explanation. You can just say, I couldn't, how many times do people go, I can't come to the party because I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. It's like, how about I just can't come to the party?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to make it.
I think people have such a hard time with that.
We do, and I do. I'm a recovering pleaser. I want people to be happy with me. I love approval. It's such a trap. Approval of man's a trap, but we have to go, channel our non-pleaser, and people that aren't pleasers. I'm like, what's that like to not care what someone thinks? So
I've grown tremendously in this issue, but there's always room to grow. But stopping and asking yourself a question: did I break one of God's laws? If I broke one of God's laws, I owe somebody an apology. I need to seek forgiveness. But if I didn't go to the deacons meeting, it's because I didn't want to go to the deacons meeting. I didn't sin against God.
Right.
For me, that's been a helpful question, because Chip puts that down as, you have broken one of God's laws, and so you need to get right with God by getting right with people. Often when I feel guilty, if I do the inner work, there is not something I can point to where I have broken God's law.
Right, and that's part of the investigation. You stop and go, I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling this icky feeling, like, where is this coming from? And you do that, like, that question to yourself, to that positive self-talk, or that positive, like, questioning, and going, am I guilty? Like, did I do something? Did I sin? No. I needed, you're being a healthy, if you're not going to choir practice, you're not going to choir party, you have drawn a boundary for your life and your family, and they should trust your heart, right? That you love choir, or that you love the church event, but you couldn't do it that night because you're tired.
In your research, you sent us a few things ahead of time. I loved your point about examples or types of inappropriate guilt, and wondered if we could talk about them just a little bit.
Yes.
I'll list them off real fast, and then you can kind of jump in. But types of inappropriate guilt is, because I think appropriate guilt is a little more easy to understand.
Yes.
In our marriage, when we fight, we know I have to apologize for that. I said something really wrong. But the inappropriate, you said, was survivor's guilt, gaslighting, passive aggressiveness, low self-worth, and then codependency and feeling responsible for others.
Yes.
Which of those do you feel like you'd like to tackle?
The two that are most prevalent are probably low self-worth, or something that's tied to a false core belief about themselves, like, I'm not enough, I'm never enough. Those kind of core beliefs that feed our insecurities and feed our guilt about something that's inappropriate guilt. And then codependency, or feeling responsible for others. Those are sneaky ones that I think anybody could fall prey to. The other one, survivor guilt, obviously is pretty unique if you've survived something that someone else didn't. And I had a client that had lost a sibling, and she just had some survivor guilt. Again, working her through that, because she should not feel guilty for that. That is not her fault. And so low self-worth and those false core beliefs. And I think y'all talked about this a little bit in another podcast about, maybe it was with Nicole, about, not having dinner ready at night if Ben asks you about dinner and you're like feeling guilty. That's because, and you were talking about something with that. That's an example of one of those core beliefs feeding that guilt that's inappropriate. And then codependency is a big one. So codependency is the basics of that are feeling responsible for someone, not to someone. You all are responsible to each other and for each other in some ways as a couple, as you know, we are dependent on our spouse, right? But that dependency of trying to drive their life or influence their life, things that are not your responsibility to be responsible for. And a lot of this can happen with parent-child, mother-daughter. It doesn't have to be just mother-daughter. That's what I've obviously experienced, and you experienced, Lynley, or
Would you like to give an example, Paige?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so we chatted a little bit before the session, and we talked about our moms. Lynley and I were talking about our moms, and my mom. There's also this, a subtle form of inappropriate, and this isn't codependency. This is what you would. Well, maybe it is codependency. I don't know. This is maybe more passive aggressive ish. It's my mom will go, "Hey," to me and my sister, do you like that top? Do you like your hair today? Do you like those bangs? Are you liking those bangs? And we're like,
I did.
I love my bangs. I loved my top, but no.
But now I'll go
Mom,
change.
I love my top. But now I'm going to go change. Yeah, I saw it go down one time with my sister. Anne was headed out to a shower or something. She's like, "Oh, do you like that top?" And my poor sister was like,
yes,
I did. So that's even that is just, even though that feels silly and it's a little bit painful, it's like, just say, "Honey," be honest. If you really think it looks bad, just say, "Honey, there might be a more flattering top that we can find for you." I mean,
yes.
Or just let them go in the top that they like, just go in the top.
Oh my goodness.
Let them go. I mean, I'm learning
You
this.
experienced that, Lynley?
Yes, I've read this book recently of, it's about parenting older kids, and it says, keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat out. And so I'm having to learn to just keep my mouth shut. And even yesterday, we had a situation with Ava, and she was talking to us about a thing that's happening, and we finally just said, do you need us to listen, or do you need an opinion? At what point do you need us to chime in here, or maybe just vent it out, kind of thing. But I do have a question about inappropriate guilt. So many times on this podcast, we refer to how we assume that a pastor and pastor's wife couple are on the same page, and it's them fighting against the church sometimes. But I almost wonder, you would maybe have more knowledge of this. I wonder if there's not a lot of inappropriate guilt that happens between the couple, because one of them has these unrealistic expectations of what the other one should be doing. And so, I mean, maybe kind of speak to that if you can. Maybe that question is a little bit hard, but it's not always the church member bringing guilt. It could be the wife bringing guilt to the husband, or him bringing it to her.
Oh, I'm sure I don't do marriage therapy, marriage counseling, but I do know that, yes, that is a huge piece of a huge issue, especially with communication and communicating expectations. So expectations are tough when they're not met, and when they're not communicated, they're often not met. So it's like, you didn't well, and this resentment builds. And then if a spouse is passive aggressive, which is a huge thing, I think that happens among married couples, of this not being directly, this really hurt me, and I need to talk to you about this. I need you to, using need language and not accusatory language, but that guilt tripping back and forth in a marriage is it's very toxic. It can be toxic. And I would think in a especially a situation where a pastor's very busy, at church a lot, involved in all these things, and have not as healthy boundaries maybe with the church. And I've had a pastor's wife once in counseling, and it was tough. She just felt second. She felt second to the church. She felt like her kids were second to the church, and that the church was also, he was not a lead pastor, but he was a support pastor. But they were short staffed, so they had him do everything: youth, choir, pastoral care. Like, he was doing everything and not raising his kids and being home with his wife. And so she had a lot of resentment. Whether she guilted him or not, I think she had tried to talk to him about it, and he was so trying to please the church and support his family. Nothing against him. He just was trying to manage it all. But yes, I think those kind of situations can be tough on a marriage.
One of the issues that pastors face all the time, I still wrestle with this as leader of Lifeway, is examining my motivations for saying yes to things. If my primary motivation is I'm going to feel guilty saying no, it's not a good motivation, because I'm going to show up to that event unprepared, a little bitter that I even said yes, regretting that I said yes, rather than feeling called to it, like I have something unique to add to that conversation. I'm afraid that if I say no, this person's going to make me feel guilty.
Right.
And I question why we even use that phrase. Someone can make me feel guilty. How do we get away from this idea that we're victims of it?
Gosh, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. It takes identifying it. And the ones that are worse, Ben, are ones that are like just like someone on the board or the deacons, trying to guilt you. And you know your relationship with that person. But when it's a person of authority, a person of influence, a parent, someone that you care about what they think, that's harder. You have to stop and go, again, where is this coming from? But if it's chronic and they're not even aware of it, like people will come in symptomatic with all these stress symptoms and things and anxiety. And it's really, the source is really this heaviness, this guilt, this kind of feeling like I can never get away from this guilt. And what I see most in counseling is adult-child issues. And because of something like this that have gone on their whole lives, parents are narcissists, making them live for them, guilt tripping if they don't come do what they want them to do. And so that's super hard. So it just depends on the level of what you're dealing with to answer that question. So it could be minor. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That's a great illustration of parent-adult-child relationships, because I do deal with a lot of people too who don't want to go to mom's for Christmas. They know there's going to be a price tag if they don't. And it's just not a healthy situation for either party. To feel.
It is not.
But what if the other person involved is not capable of having the healthy conversation? Like, what do you do then?
What I encourage is, I have a belief system with working with people because I've seen it work in people like this. I have a lot of women that deal with their mothers like this, and just helping them with resilience to say no, to draw their boundaries, come what may. And I believe you can train a parent. I have one particular that just, and we pray, and I encourage them to pray, but to choose themselves because that's codependent behavior. And so I worked with a therapist that was so good. She was such an expert on codependency. And she said, codependency, what's happening when it's she called it self-betrayal in the name of love.
That's good.
Okay. So I love my mom. But you're betraying yourself and what you and your heart need at Christmas with your family. And it's a tail wagging the dog. Like, you're going to take your whole family down to where your mom is because she refuses to get on an airplane, but she could, so, and you're wanting her to come. And so it's this, I don't ever get anything on my terms feeling, and it's a horrible feeling.
Yeah. And
I wake people up and go, hey, you get to have things on your terms. And they're like, oh, and like, they're going to survive. What they do is they push back. We train the person to push back on their parent, the woman to push back on her parent. And I deal only with women, and see what happens. Is she going to pout 3 days? Is she going to fire you as a daughter? No. Well, how long does she pout? Oh, maybe a week. Okay. Well, then everybody's going to survive that. So you train them, worst case, you're going to survive it. Mom needs you. She's not going to fire you. Like, take your power back. Like what you described, Ben, is giving your power to someone. You make me feel guilty. Is you're handing them, here, make me guilty. But you can reject it. And it just takes awareness of the situation and courage that you're going to survive it. Your heart's going to survive it. Because those are like this client I'm talking about. She learned that as a young child, single mom. She was her mom's support, always has been. And so training her to not be her mom's everything has been hard, but she's gotten there. And Christmas this year and I hear from her, I know it's coming. Every Thanksgiving, you're coming into it, I hear from her. She's like, can I have a tune up? And I'm like, sure. Because I'm just remind, this is what you do. And this last Christmas, she drew the boundary and mom responded without drama. And I think she's basically over the years kind of training her mom that this is the way it is, because you can't change mom. You can train them, I think, a little bit to not react so terribly if this is the way it is now, but it takes time and it takes courage and it takes self-awareness.
So I would think most of these people you're talking to are they have a people-pleasing tendency. So
yes,
they're terrified to push back, terrified to stand up to someone, when they've been trained for this. I mean, what is the very first step? If somebody's listening here and feels like, I need to stand up for myself, I need to take myself back a little bit, what would be even just a line or two that you would recommend them say that doesn't feel too bold and crazy for their personality?
I think to speak to, and again, the scale depends on if you're dealing with a full-blown narcissist or just someone who is a little bit needy and
sure.
and a little bit self-aware. So
let's go with that one, not the narcissist.
Yeah, not everybody has a narcissist, and people throw narcissists around a lot, but a true narcissistic personality disorder is not as common as people think.
Yeah.
And so we have narcissistic behavior, everybody does. But anyway, so I would say communication is everything. Speaking of expectation, unmet expectations, one of my other little philosophies is there's a lot of peace on the other side of a hard conversation. Like sometimes you just have to go, not accusatory language, but we're talking about counseling is the I language. I need, this is how this makes me feel. To just, first I would encourage just journaling, assessing, what am I feeling? What am I constantly feeling guilt? Where's this coming from? Again, that self-assessment. Listening to what's happening, sitting in our feelings. We don't like to, but sitting and going, we just need time to be, to hear the spirit, to know what we're feeling. And if it is this constant, like even when mom at the top, like just so tired of that feeling of not looking good. Mom doesn't think I'm pretty. That's what that goes down to, that lie. Mom doesn't think I'm pretty. And mom thinks I'm pretty. Like that's not the problem. Mom's being bossy and passive. But when you're just done with that, to go, hey mom, and it's what I did with my mom. We moved her to a facility and she kept guilting my sister and I about where she is. Not meaning to, but kind of meaning to, like, I'm in the basement. It's just terrible here. And I finally had to say, hey mom, our hearts can't take that. Right? We're so upset that we had to move you anyway. And I gave her some perspective on where we are and how that makes us feel. And she stopped. Even though
That's
her
good.
memory's not great. You just have to sometimes just stop it all and just speak what's true and how it makes you feel. And I know you love me and I know you would not hurt me, but this hurts me.
Yep.
So someone that's more of a needy, and I love you so much, speaking truth, speaking honest truth of love, because I still think, the Bible says love's the number one. Love covers all. Love covers a multitude of sins. And so to just speak love and truth and love, like just get through what's this icky kind of guilty up here, these kind of tit for tat stuff, and come down to what's true.
Hey, Paige.
What's really true about, yes.
Put your counselor hat on and counsel me for a second. Help me think through this.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I recently came across the 3 costs associated with leadership. Kirby Smart put these out. They're fantastic. The first one is, as a leader, you will make decisions that negatively affect people that you care about. That's the cost of being a leader. When Lynley and I felt called to plant a church in Denver, Colorado, we took 4 little children to Denver. Our daughter was one of them. She would come out the back door of the elementary school every day, which we spied on her and watched, and she would go to a swing set where she would swing all by herself. And I felt an enormous amount of guilt because I made a decision that was negatively affecting my little girl who is now going to school with strangers. Was it guilt? Because I didn't do anything wrong. So what was I feeling?
I think you might be feeling just deep sadness. But because if it, like, going back to what Chip would say, like that's more of a, I don't know if that's even shame. Like,
or
that
fear.
Is just
maybe fear.
Yeah, probably fear. Have I damaged my daughter?
Yes.
Have I damaged my child with this decision, which would lead to guilt? Like if you felt like you damaged your child from this move, but then you go back to God. And one thing I also say to people is just blame God. Like you do have to some point go, God moved you. God moved you. But that's hard to say to your daughter who's lonely on the swing. Like but that's part of her story too, to go, but be sad. Like if you're sad, that's the thing, our feelings are our friends, like feel them, feel the fear, feel the sad, walk through it with the Lord. And it takes you back to trust. But yeah, that I'm not saying you might feel guilty, but that would be inappropriate guilt.
That's really good. One of the things this conversation has sparked in me is to be very skeptical of calling something guilt.
Right.
Because I think I label things guilt often that really are fear or hurt or shame. It's just something we jump to. Well, I feel guilty. Well, no, I'm just terrified that I just traumatized my daughter and she's never going to have a friend again. Like that was really what was going on.
Well, to play along with this conversation, I know when we ended up leaving Storyline to come to Lifeway, we probably said 50 times, but those people moved here to be with us. Those people moved here to help us with the church. And they did, but kind of in line with what you're saying, God led them there.
Right.
Like they didn't
Right.
come there just because of us. They came there because they prayed all these families really heavily, and God led them to come out there.
Yeah.
And so they
Yeah.
had a purpose in moving too. It wasn't just to follow Ben and Lynley.
That's hard. And that goes to the responsible for. They moved there for us. Like, yes. And, they did, and they followed you, but that's more responsible too. And not responsible. You're not responsible for those people. You're responsible to lead them and to shepherd them, but God has called you away. And that leads back to trust and leading them back to trust and part of their story, trusting God with them and their story. But that's hard. But again, it's all that wrestling down, like taking those feelings and wrestling it down. And sounds like y'all did, because eventually you see the story and how it played out. Like, oh yes, it's a happy ending. For like, we love having you here at Lifeway. So yeah, it's happy ending, but for you, it's a wrestling down and an increasing of your faith and all the things, all the fruit that God bears from a difficult pruning. He it's borne so much fruit, and it probably has in those people too. But you can't see that at this point, and that's hard.
You got to
It's
investigate what is it that's really driving this feeling.
Which is probably
painful.
very,
CSI.
very relatable to the listeners, because in pastoral ministry, you move so often. You relocate your family. We feel guilty because, we've relocated our children. We've done this. What if they don't thrive? But really, it's not guilt, because it's not
Right.
wrong. It's a call.
If you think about that, what Kirby Smart says, you make hard decisions that negatively affect people you care about. It happens
They do.
when you cancel the 8:30 traditional service. It
Yes.
happens when you
Oh.
decide to eliminate X ministry that's been around for 48 years, but
Yeah.
has outlived its effectiveness. Like, those
Yeah.
are not chapter and verse, I broke the law of God decisions. They're
Right.
judgment calls. And yeah, it hurts
Yes.
people that you care about, but it's really not guilt. It could be fear of loss of relationship. I'm feeling a lot of fear that these people they're never going to
it's
be
the
my
fear of
friends again.
approval. Like that needing approval from people, needing people to like me, and they're not going to like me over that. And you're going to survive that. The truth of that is that you're going to, in the CSI, the crime scene investigation of a guilt crime, like you're going to learn that you're not responsible for that. And that you can just say, I hope, or even if we do make a mistake as leaders, like I blew it, and I'm owning that and being humble with that. And if it hurts you, I'm sorry. That's the normal guilt, the appropriate guilt, to say, I'm sorry, I blew that, and press on. And that's being a great example as a leader. But that investigation, as you said, Ben, is so important to get to truth. Like, truth sets us free on so many levels, including with this.
Yeah, that's good. The only thing I would add to that for people in ministry is sometimes, like, I can think of times where I have made the right decision but did not communicate it in a loving way. So I feel guilty, not because I made the decision, but because I didn't take the time to sit down and tell people in a way they could receive it lovingly.
Is that actual guilt? Like, is that guilt, or is that shame?
I think that's guilt.
That's guilt. Okay.
I think I think if he feels like
I blew it.
it just depends on where it came from. If you feel like you blew it, and we all know when we blow, I think we know when we blow it. Especially as leaders, like, ooh, oh yeah. Or someone comes back and goes, that didn't go over well. You're like, ooh,
Yeah.
okay. Someone you trust, like the Nathan and David. Nathan's like, hey, you blew that, bro. And he's like, oh gosh. And then he went to make it right. Right. So it's like, that's that. Sometimes it's someone telling us, sometimes it's us if we've blown it as a leader, or we know it. And yeah, I think that's appropriate guilt. But you have to do CSI on it, make sure.
Right. And where you can go back to someone and say, I'm really sorry, I blew it, and here's how. The apology goes so far. It creates, most times, a reconciliation healing that is restorative and even maybe stronger than the relationship was before, because now we've worked through a conflict and there's confidence in that.
Well, you said something earlier. What was it you said?
There's peace on the other side of a hard conversation.
Yes, that was it. I liked that.
It's true. Like, because I'm a kind of person, like, I don't love confrontation, but I will do it for peace. I want the peace that comes from reconciliation so much. And if you've ever experienced someone, asking someone forgiveness, apologizing, you're deeply apologetic, and they do not forgive you, it is super painful
Yes, it is.
to not be able to reconcile.
It is.
And so when we do that to people, it's like torture. And so we should, that's why Jesus, Jesus is so much kinder to us than we are to each other with his forgiveness of our sin. And so it's like, it can be so painful.
What's interesting about this is that there's a peacemaking side to me, and people laugh because I'm so confrontational, but I think it's a lot of what you said. Like, when I recognize something's wrong, like, I want to push and have the hard conversation to get to the other side of it. And so, like, even in our marriage, so often he'll, be frustrated with me, like, can we just have peace? And I'm like, not until after we have this conversation.
Right.
Not until we get this out. So I think that's why I like that statement so much.
And it's true, because if you are able to resolve, especially with someone that you trust, and you don't always want to have a hard conversation with someone that's not healthy or self-aware or that you don't trust. Like, it makes sure it's someone that you feel like you can have this conversation with. But sometimes you don't know that. You just need to say what you need to say, and you need to try to get from them what you need to hear from them. And so, and it's so often with a trusted person, a healthy person brings peace. And it builds trust. Like you said earlier, it builds trust.
I was recently reading about the power of the apology. I came across this piece recently, and the author of the piece said a healthy habit for Christians is to regularly sit down and just think of, who do I owe an apology to?
Right.
And it's never too late. It's never too late to go back to somebody that 12 years ago you mishandled the situation, and to reconnect and say, it's been on my conscience for years. It's amazing how much good work the Holy Spirit does when we're willing to do that kind of work. And I think I underestimate that.
Well, it's just fruit of the Spirit. It takes humility and vulnerability to do that. You humble yourself, and I believe the Spirit always moves through humility because it's His fruit, right? So I had years ago, or when someone comes to you, and like a Nathan, and says, hey, you blew this. Like years ago, I worked for Samaritan's Purse for many years before I came to Lifeway, and I managed a bunch of teams doing, advertising and community relations for one of our programs. And this woman was leaving. She'd been there 10 years. She was like leaving. We're having a big party for her. And she pulled me aside. She said, hey, I just want to tell you, I've never felt seen by you or helped by you. And, just nailed me. And she was right. I didn't prefer her. I didn't give her a lot of attention. She wasn't fun for me, And she hit me between the eyes very calmly. And it just killed me. And of course, I did not respond like, well, I was great with you. Like, I was so helpful. No, I just was like, girl, I am so sorry I hurt you. And how do we respond if we're called on something that we argue? I didn't know that guilt until she hit me with it. But when she told me, I saw it.
Can we probe into your problems for a second?
Yeah, sure.
How do you know that you were wrong? I mean, what if she had an expectation of you that was just unfair? I mean, people do that to me all the time. They're like, you walked right by me and didn't even say hello. Do they know how many people I have to walk by? I don't mean to do that.
Yeah, but that one was perfect because I did not prefer her, put it that way. She was not easy for me. I did not give her a lot of attention. She was hard for me.
So why don't you just say it's because you're annoying?
You can't say that, but what was clear to me, this is what was clear and true, is that I had hurt her.
Yeah.
Whatever, I had to receive her wound. She was wounded by me, whatever that meant, or whatever I had or hadn't done. Did I intend to hurt her? Oh, no. But had I neglected her and just had her over here and just paid more attention to these people because they're funner and easier and maybe killing it a little more. And so, yeah, I hurt her. So I apologized. Yeah.
Did you? So one thing that Ben and I struggle with is when one of us confronts the other person, we will tend to say, I need to process that. Instead of an immediate apology or a fight, we'll just say, let me process that.
Yeah.
Did you have to do that, or did you just immediately, like the Spirit just convicted you in the moment to know you were wrong?
Well, I think it was part of that was reaction. If I'm being honest, it was reaction but she was not the person that's going to be trying to guilt trip me or, it's not that. I think I was so shocked. And it was like a moment that I apologized in the moment. I don't think we were like, I was not at home. We were at some, this kind of going away conference thing, and she brought it to me there. And so I didn't have a chance to process. I mean, I could have gone away. I could have said, I'm sorry, gone away and processed and come back and said more. I didn't do that. But that just was, I don't know. I don't know if it was all appropriate, but I think apology was warranted.
Is it okay to say to another person, it's from time to time, can I process that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially in day-to-day life. Like, I'm going to need to, let me process that. And I'm a processor. I'm in a relationship with a lovely, godly man, and bless his heart, he will get these emails from me because I've been processing. And he's like, and I'll just put at the top of the email now for him because we live in different towns. So I'll just be like, processing and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And bless his sweetheart. But it gives him a chance because he's not confrontational to just read it all and da-da-da. So yeah, so I would say I need to look at what you said here this bothered me and I needed to process. And so can I ask you some questions about it? So yes, I think we always have to do that, especially that's being healthy, because we're not going to just react. Like maybe what I did with that person was not super healthy because I wanted to relieve the pain in the moment. But it is so healthy to go, hey, because a lot of us are processors and not have an immediate feeling. And so yes, it's great to go back. I need to think about what you said and get your, and that's the sitting in your feelings, get your feelings sorted out of how that made you feel and why.
I want to say, I think the reason we've started doing that more is out of maturity.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that.
We're so mature.
Sincerity matters in our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So if I just throw out an apology to you, you're going to know right away if I've really processed it or not, or if I'm just trying to resolve things because I'm ready to go eat. Versus, hey, let me think about that, because over the next couple hours, as my emotions cool, there's a good chance I'm going to see that situation a little more clearly. And if there's something there I really should feel guilty about, I need to come back and make it right. And then when I do, it'll actually mean something. Mm-hmm. So I don't think either one of us is ever skirting the issue. It's that we want to give it the appropriate attention mm-hmm. that it deserves. And I wanted to say one thing about what you said earlier too, about when you want forgiveness from someone, but they won't give it to you.
Yeah.
Here's something that's helped me to think about that is, there have been so many times in my life that I could not offer someone an apology because enough time had not passed that I could see that I was wrong.
Right.
And sometimes it takes years to look back and think, you know what, that person was actually telling me the truth and I need to go back. So there are times when I'm going to be on the receiving end of that, where I want forgiveness from someone, or I'm trying to get right with somebody and they won't reconcile. And I have to just leave that relationship where it is until the Lord's done the work.
Right.
To bring it back where it should be. Ann Orge said this in an interview we had with her once. Whenever she has a falling out with someone, she tries to have a hopeful spirit about it in saying, I don't think this is where it's going to end up. Mm. And I always thought that was a really faithful response.
Wise.
To conflict.
Wise. And, and Dr. Dodd would say, like, to that thing, if someone doesn't forgive you immediately, that you have resolved your guilt because you have gone and done what you should do. Like what you're saying, Ben, is what he would say, I think, and listen to that. His messages on guilt is that, and that you might have shame, and then what kind of shame do you have? And that kind of, just sitting and understanding that. But that's so true. And I think what y'all do, in the way you said you're mature and reacting, it's also healthy, because unhealthiness, low self-awareness leads to being really reactionary and being really defensive or getting angry, or, and so we're going to have natural defenses that rise up, but just to go, okay, I've learned from this to not react, because those kind of hot reactions, like you said, Ben, let your emotions settle, because hot reactions don't really help.
Yeah.
In the situation, they make things harder.
Yep. So let's wrap up. We're about done. If someone's out there listening and they are overwhelmed with what they feel is guilt, they're not sure, what would you tell them to do? Next steps.
Next steps, if they're feeling something, it's anything you do that, because again, like if we have a pain in our side and we're like, do I have appendicitis? Do I have a kidney stone? Like, what is that pain? Just to start, we go investigate it. We've talked about this the whole time. Like, what am I feeling? And it's hard for people that don't like to feel. There are people that don't like to feel and they just go on about their business. But at some point it's going to get painful enough where we have to stop and go, I think I have appendicitis. I'm going to the hospital. So, or I think this could be guilt, like writing your feelings, journaling. Some people don't like to journal, but if you I'm not talking about, dear God, this is my day. I'm talking about, I feel this, I think people think journaling is so cheesy, and it can be cheesy, but it's also, our brains are built to express, and handwriting things actually gets it out of your brain in this interesting, weird way that God designed us. Like, so to write down, I think I would journal some about, what am I feeling? We don't like to sit in our feelings. We like to sit with our phones, right? Let's sit and be quiet. Ask the Spirit, like, help me with this. Spirit's the great counselor. Like, lead me into truth, please. He leads us into truth. Like, what is the truth about this? So I'd say prayer and time alone with God, and a good journal is to start. And then when you do kind of realize where it's coming from, and the Spirit helps you, kind of navigate what's going on in your heart, then work towards resolving it. Like, write the truths down. Like, am I guilty? It's really takes some reflection, self-reflection, reflection with God and with yourself. And a lot of people don't take time to do that. They just carry on with the guilt because I've learned to deal with this. Like, let's just keep going. but it wears on our hearts and minds, and that wears on our bodies. The
That's
stress
good.
of it is detrimental.
That's really good. And I would just say, if you're in a setting where there's someone in your life that has high emotional intelligence and walks with the Lord, to sit down with someone, could be just a friend, and just help me think about this. Let me talk out loud. You tell me if it sounds accurate. Obviously, a therapist is always a great option, but sometimes there's just even a great friend in the church that's wise and can do that for you.
Well, and objectivity is everything.
Yeah.
I had a situation, a little bit ago, and I met one of our trainers for Wildlife Women's Forum, and I just connected with her and I said, "Can I run something by you? I just need your input. You seem wise." And it was amazing. Like, she's not a therapist, but she's highly trained. She knows personality and stuff like that. And she was, it was phenomenal.
That's
I just got an objective opinion, and that it doesn't have to be a therapist, but like you're saying, Ben, that would be number 2 step, like introspective. And then if you're really having trouble seeing, like, can you help me with perspective on this situation, and ask someone.
That's good. Paige, thanks for tackling a really tough topic. You did a great job.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you. It was so fun.
Awesome.
I mean, not fun, good fun.
It's good fun.
Well,
good hard fun.
That's another week of exploring the emotions, and this one was on guilt. We hope it helped you in your ministry and leads you to a little bit happier life in the ministry. So until next time, see you then. The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard, show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden, photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley. Recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.